From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join our conversation. In less than a month, Nick will find out what it's like to be homeless. This has nothing to do with today's podcast. I just wanted to bitch about real estate in Las Vegas. And now, broadcasting from Level 9 Studios, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman, and it's time for some Pod Therapy.
So this is why you've been pushing that shopping cart to work with all that stuff.
Just getting used to it.
Just starting to work it out. So what, your lease is up?
Lease is up, and we've been looking at renting a house.
Oh, cool.
And we have looked at several places, and by the time we look at it, it's already
price has
rented.
Changed.
No,
oh, wow.
It's already rented.
Oh, wow. Dang.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So it's just hard to find a spot.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, the real estate market in Las Vegas has been insane.
I know.
Which I'm glad for, because like we crashed hard in like 2009. But sorry, man.
But why is that got to be my problem?
You can't just renew your lease? You can't go month by month until you find a place?
Well, I could, but
yeah.
when you have to put in like a 60-day notice.
Oh, right.
So then at that point, they're like, okay, and then they start finding somebody to lease it. So for all I know, somebody has already claimed my apartment.
So you're up against the gun now.
Yeah.
This is it. So July is when it's over?
No, June 26th.
Just go to a weekly, dude. There's, you know how to get rid of bed bugs.
Well, I don't
Just
know.
spray things down.
This place looks nice.
Yeah.
Scott, can I?
Yeah, we can work something out with
Okay,
Scott.
I got the thumbs up. All right.
We'll get you a little cot
good.
and you'll be set, man.
good.
It'll be great. We'll get some bank episodes. It'll be fine.
Level 9 Studios.
Level
My
9.
new home.
Casa de Nick and / Level 9 Studios. I'm rooting for you, buddy. I hope it works out. And, if not, you can just sleep in your office. Why don't you just do that? You have a couch.
Well, damn, we're running a rehab.
Yeah, what are you worried about, man? We've got beds.
They live nicer than I do.
That's right. Yeah, you can get some yoga, massage, executive chef. You'll be set for a while, man. I've been telling you to bring your damn dogs to the rehab for a long time. So bring the puppies. They'll be recovery puppies.
God, that's awesome.
See?
That's a great idea.
You're set. You don't need nothing.
Well, my problems are solved.
So
Let's move on to everybody else's.
Speaking of drugs, speaking of rehab, big, huge news, Nick, that has fallen out of the sky of research. And actually, this is something a lot of people have probably heard of, but I want to unpack it because a new data piece came out. It's a big deal. So Dr. Tara Gomes has published in JAMA Network Open with St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, Ontario, this new piece of data about American deaths due to the opioid crisis. And the new big headline is that 1 in every 5 deaths in young adults in America are due to opioid-related situations. And here's the big quote from the paper. It says that the percentage of deaths attributable to opioids in the U.S. increased by 292% from 2001 to 2016, with 1 in every 65 deaths related to opioid use by 2016. This number varied by age group and sex. Men represented nearly 70% of all opioid deaths in 2016, and the highest burden was among young adults aged 24 to 35. So the big, huge takeaway here, Nick, is that this is now the number 1 killer of Americans that are under 50, and it is now the case that 1 in every 5 deaths for somebody who is under the age of 35 is due to opioids. And so a lot of our listeners have heard the president and heard people talk about the opioid crisis, and they're probably vaguely aware of what that means. But when we see a headline like this, when we see research like this, and we are 2 guys that work in a rehab and you're an addiction specialist, this is the kind of thing we ought to take a look at and maybe do some education, teach the viewer, teach the listener. Listen, when we talk about this, here's what the hell we're even talking about. But when you see that kind of data, Nick, give me an impression. What is that? How does that strike you to see that kind of a number?
It's scary. I mean, because it feels like it's getting worse. It's definitely getting worse. And it's, when it gets to the point where we're talking about death rates and how that now becomes, so popular amongst the young age group, that it's just to think that that's a common way to die at that age is insane.
Well, here's another quote they put in here, which I thought was an interesting way to quantify it. It says, Dr. Gomes concluded that a total of 1,681,359 years of life were lost prematurely to opioid-related causes in 2016 alone, which exceeds the years of life lost each year from hypertension, HIV/AIDS, and pneumonia in the United States. That was in 1 year, 1.6 million years of life lost to Americans because of death, premature years lost. So when we talk about this being an epidemic, when we talk about this being a serious crisis, you have to understand that this is what we're talking about. The plague killed 1 in 5 humans in Europe. Okay, 20% of the continent was wiped out by the plague. This is the American plague. 1 in 5 people under 35 years old are dying because of this crisis every year. That is insane. Or 1 in 5 of all the deaths that happen for that age group. This is a plague. And when we talk about it as an epidemic, that's what we mean. But it's unfamiliar to people because they think, well, this isn't something you're born with, right? This isn't like a kidney disease, or it isn't like diabetes, or it isn't like, some kind of cancer, like a childhood cancer. It's something that you seem to develop. And so a lot of people are unfamiliar with it, and they might even, feel like, hey, this is bigger than just a health problem, right? It's also a crime problem. It's also a social problem. It's also a health care problem.
It's a health care problem, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2012, there were 94 opiate prescriptions per 100 people in Nevada.
That's insane.
So 94 prescriptions per 100 people.
Wow. 94% of the population, there's at least one script out there just for them. And
yeah,
pills to humans, it'd be insane.
I mean, so some people may have had 2 prescriptions,
right? But it all averages out.
But to think 94 for every. There's 94 prescriptions out there for every 100 people. That's
here's what we're going to do, folks. Friends of this show, we know that you guys are psychology, enthusiasts. You want to know about this kind of stuff. And even if you don't personally have this issue or can't relate to it, this is so common now that it's important to your life.
Yeah, and that's another thing I was going to say too, is that, within the next 5 years, everybody is going to have experienced firsthand the death of someone from opiates.
Yes. Somebody on your Facebook is going to have an RIP page because of this, or as a related consequence of this. You're hearing about it all the time. And so, Nick, let's plunge into this a little bit. I want to unpack for the person who walks up to this podcast and says, listen, I have absolutely zero knowledge about what the hell you guys are talking about, but I've heard the word opioid, and I've never used it in a sentence. I have never used it in common kitchen table talk, but I've seen it in headlines, and I'm vaguely aware it has something to do with pills or something to that effect. Right. Let's start at ground zero, okay? So, Nick, what is an opioid?
Okay. So we hear terms like opioids, opiates, which are kind of used synonymously. There's actually a subtle difference in the two.
But they're all part of the same problem.
They're all part of the same thing.
We classify them the same.
So really we're looking at substances that are either directly derived from the opium poppy, which is going to be like heroin, morphine, things like that, or synthetically created. So hydrocodone, all Percocet, stuff like that. That is our prescription painkillers. Yes. So when we talk about opiates, we're talking about prescription painkillers. We're also talking about heroin.
And heroin has different types, right? There's black tar heroin. There's the what do they call it? The white angel or whatever that is. So there's all these different things. So when we talk about opioids or opiates, which again are synonymous, we're talking about a type of substance, right? And when you think about this, I want you to think about it as if it's in a different basket. So there's like the marijuana basket, and there's lots of different kinds of cannabis and marijuana. There's the methamphetamine basket. There's amphetamines, which is a different thing, right? And so you know that there's different kinds of baskets, and they're usually in uppers and downers. Nick, what kind of drug is an opiate? What effect does it have?
Analgesics.
Yes,
so
pain relievers.
Pain relievers, right.
Now, they don't just take away pain like Tylenol takes pain. Tylenol or ibuprofen is an anti-inflammatory, right? So your body is inflamed, and that's causing pain. Your muscles are tense. So an anti-inflammatory or muscle relaxer takes that away. Opiates work differently. They don't actually decrease the inflammation in the tissue. They mask the actual nerve receptor of the pain. They cover that up in your brain.
Right. Yeah. So they block the signal, essentially. That's a good way to look at it.
So it's like a signal interference drug. That's what it essentially does. Now, the result of taking this kind of a drug is usually a list of side effects like euphoria. It doesn't just feel good to have the pain go away. It also induces euphoria throughout your body. So you feel pleasure, you feel good. A lot of people feel very relaxed. They feel tired. An opiate is considered a downer, whereas methamphetamine is going to jack you up. You're usually going to be what we call tweaking for several days, running around with your head, flying off the shoulders. Opiates are the other way around. Somebody who's using heroin, which is a very condensed version of an opiate turned into a new form, usually into a powder or a liquid, or a powder that's then dissolved into a liquid, they can then smoke that powder, or they can actually inject that powder into their veins. And this is where you're hearing a lot about the opioid crisis having a lot to do with this image of a junkie. And the junkie image is usually the person with a needle in the bathroom, putting a rubber band around their arm and trying to shoot up. And you've heard a lot about that too. That's usually where it leads, because one of the other interesting side effects of an opiate is that your body quickly builds a tolerance. And then what happens, Nick, whenever you stop taking the opiate?
Well, then you go into withdrawal.
Yes.
Right. Your body starts to, it expects that to be there. And then whatever the effect was that you were getting from using the substance, you have the opposite effect when you go into withdrawal.
Yes, it's very acute. And that's the thing, folks, whenever you hear about this being an epidemic and you're wondering, how the hell can this thing be this problematic? I mean, it's killing people. Why the hell are they reaching for it? What you don't understand is that with a lot of drugs, like with marijuana, if you smoke marijuana and then you smoke a lot of it and then you stop smoking it, you will have a withdrawal effect. It's just not going to kill you. It doesn't feel like death. It's uncomfortable.
You're going to be irritable.
You're irritable. You're going to be unable to sleep. You're going to feel a little bit of agitation.
Decreased appetite.
Heroin is as close, withdrawal from heroin is as close as you can come to death without dying. That's the way I want you to think about it. The only drug that I think you can die from when you're withdrawing is alcohol, and that's only because it's possible for you to go into a seizure.
And benzos.
Which for the same reason. Yeah, for the exact same reason. Heroin, you feel like death. Death would be a relief from heroin.
That's usually how I describe it to people. You're probably not going to die, but you're going to want to.
Yeah, I think of the scene in Aladdin where the genie tells Aladdin, genies can't kill people, but you'd be surprised what you can live through. That's heroin, okay? Like, coming off of heroin can't kill you, but it is so agonizing, so horrific. Your bones hurt. Your skin hurts. You are in agony, pain. Your stomach is on fire. You're in cramps. You're in such physical agony that you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't stand. You're vomiting, you have diarrhea, and this lasts for 3, 4, 5 days. And what typically happens is this is so hard to come off of, which we refer to as kicking. It's so hard to come off of that you don't. You try and you think, okay, I'm just going to bite on a rag and get through this agony. It is that hard that your survival instincts kick in. And you will actually go find more.
The other important thing to note here, too, is that it's not that you're going to go into withdrawal symptoms if you simply stop using. You can go into withdrawal symptoms when you cut down.
Or when you stay at the same amount.
Right.
Because you start needing more.
Right. Yeah. So I once had a client who was actually a physician, and he was kind of having his friends write scripts for him. And his habit got up to, he was taking 22 hydrocodone twice a day.
Jeez.
22 pills at one time.
Right.
Doing that twice a day. And it got to a point where he said if he took 21, he would start experiencing withdrawal symptoms.
And this, folks, I hope you just heard that, okay? Perk your ears up. Highlight that last sentence. Here's the magic problem about the opiate compared to other drugs. It is agony, absolute physical, mental anguish whenever you don't have enough of it in your system, or it starts to wane away. And if you try to stop altogether, it's absolute agony. Your survival skills kick in. You will go find more, but it keeps building up. That doctor gets up to 21 pills, then he needs 22, then he needs 23, and it happens rapidly. And this is why people ultimately graduate, we call it, to heroin. Heroin is 1/3 the cost of the pills, and it's 2 to 3 times more effective. It lasts longer. You need less of it to get by. And getting by is the central concept. These people are not at some point using this stuff because they want to. Yes, they're addicted to it, but it's an addiction in the sense that it's no longer pleasurable. There's brief amounts of euphoria and mostly a running away from the agony of withdrawal.
Right. And so we can easily see how the transition would go. Because I've worked with a lot of people who haven't progressed to the point where they're using we'll call street drugs like
Heroin.
heroin, you know,
Smoking